Long ago, in a land where the earth hummed with ancient songs, and the wind carried whispers of forgotten spirits, there lived a young woman whose fate would become a lesson for generations. This is not just a tale of tragedy, but one of justice, woven into the very fabric of the universe. It is a story of cruelty, resilience, and the inevitable hand of karma that never leaves a debt unpaid. Welcome to Innocent Stories, where we uncover the tales that shape our world. In a village nestled between rolling green hills and dense forests, Nia was known to all. She was a vision of grace, her skin glowing like the morning sun, her eyes deep as the river that fed the land. But it was not just her beauty that captured hearts, it was her spirit, kind yet strong, wise beyond her years. She moved through life with a quiet dignity that made people admire her. She treated all with respect, from the elders who sat beneath the great baobab tree to the children who ran barefoot through the dusty paths. But where light exists, darkness lurks nearby. Can one act of cruelty destroy a soul, or will justice prevail? Stay with Innocent Stories to find out. Jabari was a man of power and wealth, a man who had never known rejection. Born into privilege, he carried himself with arrogance, believing that all things he desired should be his. When he set his eyes on Nia, he saw her not as a person, but as a possession, something to claim. However, Nia's heart was not swayed by wealth or dominance. She sought love, respect, and kindness. And so, when Jabari approached her with his intentions, she refused him. Rejection, to a man like Jabari, was a wound too deep to bear. In his heart, admiration twisted into rage, longing became obsession, and desire turned into something dark. What he did next would shake the village to its core and call upon forces beyond human understanding. But in the grand design of fate, no cruelty goes unpunished, and no soul escapes the weight of its actions. The village awoke each morning to the golden embrace of the rising sun, its light spilling over fields of maize and cassava, bathing the earth and huts in warmth. Birds filled the air with their songs, and the river that snaked through the land whispered secrets to the wind. Here, in this land of abundance and harmony, lived Nia, a woman whose beauty was spoken of even beyond the borders of her village. But it was not just her beauty that made her unforgettable. Nia possessed a rare kind of grace, one that went beyond mere appearance. She walked with a quiet confidence, her movements fluid like the river, her voice soft yet firm. Her dark eyes held the wisdom of generations, and her laughter, when it rang through the village, felt like sunlight breaking through the thickest of clouds. She was a daughter of the earth, connected to its rhythms, understanding its cycles of giving and taking. Nia's kindness was not a performance, but a way of being. She treated the elderly with reverence, always pausing to listen to their stories, valuing their words like sacred scripture. She braided the hair of young girls, telling them tales of great warrior queens and wise priestesses, so they would grow up knowing that strength and gentleness could exist within the same soul. She tended to the sick with gentle hands, mixing herbs in clay pots, whispering prayers of healing as her mother had taught her. Despite the admiration she received, Nia never carried herself with arrogance. She believed that beauty was fleeting, but a kind heart could leave a mark on the world long after one was gone. Even the poorest in the village never left her doorstep empty-handed, for she believed that to share was to honor the gods who gave so freely to the earth. Her life, though simple, was rich. The village, surrounded by towering baobab trees and fields that swayed with the wind, was a place where everyone knew each other. Festivals filled the air with music, the drums echoing through the night as bodies moved in celebration. During the harvest season, laughter and song accompanied the work, and at night, under the silver glow of the moon, elders told stories that bound the people to their ancestors. It was in this peaceful existence that Nia thrived, never suspecting that darkness was waiting just beyond the horizon. That among the many eyes that looked upon her with admiration, one pair burned with something far more dangerous, an obsession that would soon test the very essence of who she was. Jabari was a man of power, a name spoken with both admiration and quiet fear in the village. Born into a family of wealth and influence, he had never known denial. His father had been a great warrior, his mother a daughter of nobility, and from an early age, he had been raised to believe that the world would bend to his will. His home, the grandest in the village, stood atop a small hill, its walls adorned with fine carvings, its floors covered in rare animal hides. Where others toiled in the fields under the sun's unforgiving gaze, Jabari lived a life of comfort, surrounded by servants who catered to his every need. He carried himself with an air of entitlement, his presence commanding attention wherever he went. When he spoke, others listened, not out of respect, but out of obligation. He was a man accustomed to having his desires fulfilled, whether it be land, cattle, or the most beautiful women of the village. And when he first laid eyes on Nia, he decided that she, too, would be his. At first, his attraction was simple. She was stunning, her presence like a flame that drew all towards her. But the more he watched her, the more his desire grew into something deeper, something dangerous. He saw the way the villagers admired her, how even the elders spoke of her with reverence. She was different from the others, untouched by greed or vanity. Unlike the women who eagerly sought his favor, Nia remained distant, her gaze never lingering on him longer than necessary. Jabari took this as a challenge. He convinced himself that Nia was meant to be his, that fate had placed her in his path. And in his mind, what Jabari wanted, Jabari always got. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in hues of amber and crimson, he approached her. The village square was alive with the chatter of merchants and the scent of roasted maize, but when Jabari walked forward, a hush followed. The people parted, watching with curiosity, knowing well the man's reputation. "Nia," he said, his voice smooth, laced with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won, "you are the most beautiful woman in this village. A woman like you deserves more than a simple life. Be my wife, and I will give you everything you could ever dream of." Nia lifted her gaze, meeting his with quiet strength. She did not tremble in his presence as others did. She did not lower her eyes or blush as the other women did when he spoke to them. Instead, she smiled softly, the kind of smile that carried wisdom beyond her years. "Jabari," she replied, her tone gentle but firm, "I do not seek wealth or power. A union should be built on love, on kindness, and respect. You are strong, and you are powerful, but my heart does not belong to you." The words struck him harder than any spear ever could. For the first time in his life, Jabari had been refused. The murmurs of the villagers around them became an unbearable noise in his ears. He felt their eyes upon him, saw the way some tried to hide their smirks, how others whispered behind their hands. It was not just rejection, this was humiliation. His jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. "You dare reject me," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Do you not understand what I offer you?" Nia remained unmoved. "A heart cannot be bought, Jabari." Her words, simple yet cutting, ignited something dark within him. His admiration twisted into something foul, something venomous. As she turned to leave, he stood frozen, his body rigid with rage. He had been raised to believe that no one denied him, yet here she was, walking away as if he were nothing more than an ordinary man. That night, as the village settled into sleep, Jabari sat alone in his grand home, his mind burning with thoughts of Nia. If she would not come to him willingly, he thought, then she would learn what it meant to deny a man like him. What had begun as desire had now become an obsession, and in the depths of his fury, he made a terrible decision, one that would change both their fates forever. What could drive a man to such darkness? Keep watching Innocent Stories to uncover the chilling truth. The night was quiet, the kind of silence that settles when the world is at peace. The village, bathed in the glow of the moon, slept soundly beneath the watchful eyes of the ancestors. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the distant smoke of dying fires. Somewhere, a night bird called, unaware of the horror that was about to unfold. Jabari had spent days stewing in his rage. Nia's rejection had become a poison in his veins, spreading through him until every thought, every breath, was consumed by the fire of his wounded pride. He could not erase the memory of her walking away, the quiet strength in her voice as she refused him. It was an insult he could not forgive. He would make her regret humiliating him. He would make sure no man ever looked at her with admiration again. He had heard of a terrible substance, a liquid that could burn flesh like dry wood in a flame. In the depths of his fury, he sought it out, trading gold and cattle to a traveler who dealt in forbidden things. When he uncorked the small clay jar, a sharp, acrid scent filled his nostrils, making his eyes water. This was his answer. This was how he would ruin her. The night he chose was like any other. Nia had spent the evening tending to an elderly woman, pressing healing herbs into her hands before beginning her walk home. The path was familiar to her, a winding trail flanked by tall grasses and sleeping trees. She had walked it countless times, never once fearing the darkness. She did not see the shadow that followed her. She did not hear the hurried footsteps behind her until it was too late. A hand shot out from the darkness, grabbing her wrist. She gasped, struggling, but the grip was unyielding. Then a voice, low, furious, trembling with rage, "You thought you could embarrass me? You thought you could reject me and walk away unscathed?" Her breath hitched. "Jabari? If I cannot have you," he whispered, "then no one will." Before she could scream, before she could twist free, she saw the jar in his other hand. The moonlight caught the liquid inside, and then he threw it. The world exploded in pain. A searing, burning agony, unlike anything she had ever known, tore through her face. It was as if fire had come alive and was eating her flesh, sinking into her skin, her bones. She screamed, a sound so raw and filled with suffering that it sent shivers through the night. She fell to the ground, clutching her face, writhing as the acid did its cruel work. The liquid hissed as it melted her skin. Her vision blurred, her mind unable to process the horror. The pain was unbearable, like knives carving into her over and over again. She screamed again, her cries carrying through the village like a spirit wailing in the night. Lights flickered in the huts. Doors swung open. Voices rose in panic as villagers rushed toward the sound of suffering. Jabari did not stay to witness what he had done. He stepped back, breath heavy, his hands trembling. Even in his madness, he knew that what he had done could never be undone. He turned and fled into the darkness, leaving Nia behind, broken, burning, and screaming beneath the cold gaze of the moon. The first to reach her was an elderly man who had known her since childhood. His gasp was swallowed by the night as he fell to his knees beside her. Others followed, torches illuminating the terrible scene. The once beautiful Nia was unrecognizable. Her face, her skin, melted, twisted into something that no longer resembled the woman they had loved. The acid had stolen not just her beauty, but the very essence of who she had been. Women wailed, hands covering their mouths in horror. Children clung to their mothers, eyes wide with fear. Some of the men rushed into the darkness, calling for Jabari, but he was already gone. Nia's screams had faded into choked sobs, her voice hoarse from pain. Her fingers dug into the dirt, her body trembling violently. She did not know what had happened to her, but she knew, deep in her soul, that she would never be the same again. She had been punished for her strength, for her refusal to submit. And now, as the night stretched endlessly around her, she wished, for the first time in her life, that she had never been born. Nia drifted between wakefulness and darkness, caught in a cycle of agony that never seemed to end. The world had become a place of unbearable pain, a fire that lit at her flesh long after the acid had done its worst. Days passed in a blur of whispered prayers and the scent of crushed herbs. Hands tended to her wounds, gentle, careful hands, but no amount of care could undo what had been done. Her face, once the pride of the village, was now a battlefield of scars. The acid had carved its cruelty into her skin, leaving behind twisted flesh, patches of raw red, and deep wounds that would never truly heal. Where once her reflection had shown beauty and warmth, now the water in the clay bowl reflected something monstrous. The first time she saw her face, her screams sent birds flying from the trees. The village grieved for her, but their sorrow was laced with something else, fear. At first, they came in waves, bringing offerings of food and cloth, muttering condolences. But soon, the visits became less frequent. Whispers replaced sympathy. She was too proud, some murmured. Perhaps this was fate humbling her. Children peered at her from a distance, their wide eyes filled with terror. Some ran when they saw her, and the men who had once admired her no longer met her gaze. Nia felt it all, the pity, the revulsion, the unspoken words that clung to the air like smoke. She had been the village's pride, the woman they spoke of with admiration. Now, she was a ghost, a cautionary tale of what happened when one defied a powerful man. She withdrew into herself, barely speaking, barely eating. She sat in the shadows of her hut, staring at the floor, unmoving for hours. She refused to step outside, refused to let the sun touch her ruined face. What was left for her now? If beauty was the first thing people saw, and hers was gone, did she even exist anymore? The days turned to weeks. She stopped counting. Her mother, her one pillar of strength, refused to let her slip away. She sat beside her daughter every night, brushing her hair as she had when Nia was a child, singing songs of old warriors, of women who had faced impossible trials and still stood tall. "You are more than your face," she whispered one night, her voice firm. "You are still Nia. You are still the daughter of this land." Nia did not answer, but deep inside, a seed of something stirred. She had been strong once. Could she be strong again? Could she find a way to live in a world that now looked at her with fear instead of admiration? She did not know the answer, but she knew one thing: she could not remain in the darkness forever. The village had not forgotten what Jabari had done, but his wealth and influence cast a long shadow. Justice, it seemed, was a privilege for the powerful. Some men spoke in hushed tones, clenching their fists, vowing that if the elders did not act, they would take matters into their own hands. But the fear of his family's reach held them back. Jabari, unrepentant, walked through the village as if nothing had happened. He carried himself with the same confidence, his shoulders squared, his chin high. But something had shifted. The greetings that once met him with warmth were now stiff and forced. The admiration in people's eyes had dulled into something else: unease, quiet resentment. At the village council, where the elders gathered beneath the great baobab tree, there was anger. Some demanded punishment. Others hesitated, knowing Jabari's family had deep ties to the land, to the merchants who brought prosperity to their people. A decision was delayed. But one elder, the wisest among them, simply shook his head. His voice, deep and steady, carried through the air. "There are forces older than this village," he said, "older than men who believe themselves untouchable. No evil goes unpunished. If justice does not come from our hands, it will come from the hands of fate itself." And then, the whispers of karma began. At first, they were small things, easily dismissed. A storm ruined a portion of Jabari's harvest, something that had not happened in years. A business deal that should have brought him great wealth fell through when the merchant he worked with was caught in a scandal. Then, the misfortunes grew sharper. His most trusted allies began to turn against him, doubting his leadership, questioning his judgment. Deals that once came effortlessly now slipped through his fingers. The very people who had once laughed at his jokes now avoided his gaze. His arrogance, which had always drawn people to him like moths to a flame, now repelled them. The men of the village no longer sought his company. Women who had once thrown themselves at his feet whispered behind his back, speaking of the wickedness he had committed. The fall was slow, but it was coming. Jabari still held his head high, still tried to convince himself that he was untouchable. But in the dead of night, when no one was watching, he felt the weight of something unseen pressing down on him. Something was coming for him. He just didn't know what. The night was thick with an eerie silence, the kind that made even the trees seem to hold their breath. The village, though at rest, was not truly asleep. There was a weight in the air, a tension that whispered of something unseen, something waiting. Jabari lay in his grand home, sprawled upon his fine bedding, but sleep would not come. A strange unease had settled deep in his bones. He tossed and turned, his skin prickling as if unseen eyes were upon him. The wind outside howled through the trees, carrying voices low, whispering voices that sent a shiver down his spine. Then came the pain. At first, it was subtle, a burning sensation at the edge of his face. He sat up, rubbing his jaw, but the feeling only grew. A deeper heat spread across his skin, and it turned into agony. He gasped, stumbling to his feet, his breath ragged. His hands trembled as he reached for the polished brass mirror that sat in the corner of his chamber. What he saw made his blood run cold. His reflection was changing before his eyes. The smooth, proud face that had once drawn admiration was now marred with dark patches, his skin bubbling as if something vile festered beneath it. His fingers traced the growing sores, and a scream tore from his throat as the flesh beneath his touch crumbled like ash. The spirits had awoken. In the deepest part of the night, the village elder stirred from his sleep. He sat up, his wrinkled hands pressing into the mat beneath him. His bones ached, but the pain was nothing compared to the weight in his chest. He had seen this before, in stories passed down from generations, in warnings etched into the sacred stones near the river. "The spirits of justice have risen," he murmured. they have heard Nia's cries. The next morning, the village was abuzz with murmurs. Servants from Jabari's household ran into the streets, their faces pale with fear. Word spread quickly, Jabari was ill, stricken by something unnatural. Some whispered that he had been cursed. Others feared the wrath of the ancestors. When he finally emerged, the people recoiled. The man who had once carried himself with unshakable pride now stumbled like a wounded animal. His once flawless skin was peeling, his face bearing grotesque scars, eerily similar to the ones he had inflicted upon Nia. His once powerful voice was hoarse, his breath labored. The villagers did not need words to understand this was not mere sickness. This was judgment. His wealth, too, began to crumble like sand slipping through his fingers. The merchants who had once sought his favor now turned their backs. His businesses failed, his livestock grew sick, and his fields, once fertile, refused to yield crops. The spirits had stripped him of everything, just as he had stripped Nia of her dignity, her beauty, her future. One by one, the people abandoned him. Even his closest allies whispered behind his back, wary of the unseen force that had marked him. No one wanted to be near a man whom the spirits had condemned. Jabari, once feared, once revered, now wandered the village as a shadow of himself. The power he had wielded, the wealth he had flaunted, meant nothing now. He had mocked fate. He had believed himself untouchable. But no evil goes unpunished. At first, Nia did not believe she could ever walk among the people again. The weight of their stares, the pity in their eyes, it was too much to bear. But time, like the steady flow of the river, continued forward, and with it, something inside her began to shift. She had spent too long trapped in grief, allowing the cruelty of one man to define her. But was she not still Nia? Did the scars on her face take away the kindness in her heart, the wisdom in her mind, the fire in her soul? She would not let them. It began with small steps. One day, she sat outside her hut, letting the morning sun warm her skin. The next, she walked to the market, ignoring the hushed voices around her. She did not cover her face. She did not hide. And then, she started to help. She sat with the sick, soothing their pain with the knowledge of healing herbs passed down through generations. She taught the young girls of the village, not of beauty, but of strength, how to read the land, how to weave, how to carry themselves with dignity that no man could steal. The whispers that had once followed her changed. No longer was she a victim, a cautionary tale. She became something else, a living testament to survival. One day, a young girl approached her, wide-eyed and uncertain. "Does it hurt?" she asked, reaching out to touch the edge of Nia's scars. Nia knelt before her, taking the child's small hand in her own. "It did," she said honestly, "but pain is not the end of a story. It is only the beginning of a new one." And the village listened. Where once they had pitied her, now they admired her. Where once they had looked away in discomfort, now they met her gaze with respect. The day she walked through the village and saw no more fear in their eyes, only reverence, she knew she had won not through revenge, not through hate, but through resilience. Jabari, once the most powerful man in the village, now roamed the outskirts like a cursed spirit. His skin, once smooth and admired, was now a patchwork of decay and rot. His body, once strong and commanding, had withered to a frail husk. He had nothing left, no wealth, no allies, no power. He staggered through the streets, his feet dragging in the dust. The villagers no longer whispered in fear of him. Instead, they averted their gazes, unwilling to meet the eyes of a man so thoroughly ruined by his own deeds. Some pitied him. Others remembered Nia and knew that his suffering was not misfortune, it was justice. Desperation clawed at him. He stumbled toward the great baobab tree, where the elders often gathered, and fell to his knees before them. "Please," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper, "I have suffered enough. Have mercy. Speak to the spirits on my behalf." The elders did not move. The oldest among them, the one who had spoken of karma's justice, merely shook his head. "The spirits do not listen to pleas from the wicked," he said. "Your fate was sealed the moment you raised your hand against the innocent." Jabari turned to the villagers, his once proud eyes now wild with terror. "You all knew me. I was once your leader. Have you no mercy?" But the people remained silent. One by one, they turned away from him, as he had once turned away from the suffering he had caused. Alone, abandoned, and cursed, Jabari had nowhere to go. Some say he wandered into the wilderness, disappearing into the shadows of the great forest, never to be seen again. Others say madness took him, that his own guilt became his final torment. But one thing was certain: his name was no longer spoken with admiration. His story became a warning, a lesson passed down through generations. And so, the tale of Nia and Jabari lived on, not just as a memory, but as a lesson carried through generations. The villagers would gather beneath the great baobab tree, where elders would recount the story to wide-eyed children, their voices weaving fate and justice into the fabric of time. They spoke of cruelty and its inescapable price, of resilience that turns suffering into strength, and of karma, the silent force that never forgets. Nia, once seen as a victim, had become a symbol of something greater. She was no longer just the woman who had been wronged. She was the woman who had risen, who had refused to let pain define her. She had taught the village that beauty was not in a flawless face, but in the fire of one's spirit. And Jabari? His name faded into whispers, a cautionary tale of what befalls those who believe themselves above justice. The wind carried the story across the land, through rivers and forests, into the hearts of those who needed to hear it. For no evil goes unpunished, and no suffering goes unnoticed. Karma always finds its way. Thank you for joining us on Innocent Stories. Subscribe and share to keep these powerful tales alive.